Hello, everybody. Welcome to Rose City Politics. We are off the heels of a really great Patreon episode. We don't usually do the Patreon tease right off the top, but quite frankly, I think you should be jumping on board. If you're looking to try to get the backstory of what we're talking about tonight, what we are going to be talking about tonight, excuse me, you're going to want to listen to that, but you're also going to want to hear it because we've got a new plan with it. We've got a new format. It's going to be great. But anyways, thanks for joining us tonight. Our regular panel tonight, of course, includes myself, John Lidke. We are joined by Doug Sartori on the panel as well, coming from the gates of hell, Lucifer in the background.
This is Skeletor's castle, buddy.
Skeletor's castle.
I'm plotting the takeover of Castle Grayskull. It will be mine.
There you go. I like it. You know, it's a good background to have as we're moving into our third, fourth, fifth, sixth lockdown in Ontario. We're getting to the point that we're reaching the Walking Dead situation where, you know, secure the windows, secure the doors.
The whispers are coming.
So yeah, let me ask you guys this. Our BizX column is out today that we wrote last month, and it's about post-pandemic Windsor. How are you guys feeling about that?
Well, that's what's the problem when you write an article a month ahead of time. It just doesn't work out sometimes.
Everything looked like it was going really well, and I wrote like, you know, it'll be great. Let's just try to envision an amazing post, you know, pandemic world. And it's like, nah, fuck you, idiots. Oh no, I'm sorry, Doug. Now you got to edit it immediately. We're right into it.
It's still good, folks. You should read it. It's just going to be a little bit delayed.
It'll still apply just a few months from now. So it's good to have you here, Doug. We also have Don Merrifield coming from his void of insanity. Don, what's it like to be selling homes from inside of an endless void that has no personal property?
Yeah, I wish I could be selling homes from an endless void, but you know, ever since this pandemic started, we've been essential. So they've been throwing us out in the hot zone out there. So it's mildly terrifying.
It's not the best.
John, do you find that that showing homes in a full hazmat suit has an impact on sales?
Only in summer because you get pretty sweaty. In the wintertime, it's nice because it's nice and warm, but
I bet, you know, I'm going to follow up on that for a quick second. I don't care about the audience. Like, did you notice a difference at all between like when, you know, the lockdown first came down, you know, in the summer of last year, which is Doug's talking about with his joke, versus where things like let up? Like, was there actual noticeable difference?
Yeah, moderately. I'm not going to lie to you. You know, real estate agents, it's, you know, it's a weird business because it's, you know,
you're here to prey off of the blood of, you know, the elders that don't exist.
I wish it was that exciting, but really it's just, you know, you're not making a living unless you're selling houses. So unfortunately, I don't think some realtors were taking all the precautions that they should have been taking, and unbeknownst to the public, because the health unit didn't really say anything because they won't, but there's been many outbreaks associated with real estate agents and real estate companies. And even in our own office, we've had people fill out COVID forms and say, you know, I'm fine, go look at a house, and then call us back later and say, oh, by the way, I lied on that form. My sister has COVID, but I really wanted to see that house. So apparently we're expendable. So, you know, it's cool.
Expendable Don. That's what I've always said. That's how I view you. But, you know, let's just ignore what you have to say. We got to move on, Don. Don't worry about that. Thank you so much to our Patreon subscribers. They are the best. You guys make the show happen. It is wonderful. Let's also just give our kind thanks to BizX Magazine. Thank you so much to BizX. Check out bizxmagazine.com. And of course, we're available on Facebook, Twitter, YouTube, wherever you find your podcasting apps. And LiUNA 625 makes this pre-record happen regardless of what Don has to say about his, you know, working situation. LiUNA is there to allow us to put the show out. If it was Don's world, we wouldn't have a show. You'd all be forced to buy something from him. And that's just how it would go. Wouldn't be the best, but it would be Don's city politics.
If I was king.
Anyways, jokes aside, we're so glad to have you all here tonight. We got a great show. We're going to jump right into it. Health Canada has recalled Hiram Walker's hand sanitizer over ingredients linked to a skin irritant. Thanks to CBC Windsor for putting this one out. As I just said, they have now done a full recall. It's a bad story. It's not a good story. I could actually dive into the facts, but it really doesn't matter. We all know what they are. Health Canada came out and they told the city in a very private matter, stop distributing, stop producing. And the city went, well, we haven't produced this stuff in 8 months, but we're not going to tell you we're going to stop distributing it. And Health Canada went, no, you guys should probably stop distributing it. And the city went, nah, we're not going to do that. And Mayor Dilkins decided to come out very publicly in a way that need not, quite frankly, have been done. There was no need for this story. I said it on our Patreon show last week. You should all check out the Patreon show. We go really in depth into the issue, quite frankly. But I said last week, this shouldn't have been a story by any means, shape, or form. But, you know, the city under Mayor Dilkins decided they wanted to make it a big story, and they got a big story. They got the coverage that they wanted. They challenged Health Canada and they said, what are you going to do? We distributed Health Canada, I guess, quasi approved because no one disapproved it during the height of the pandemic. But now, 12 months later, how dare you decide to tell us we can't distribute it anymore? And Health Canada responded in kind. It's recalled. You're causing health problems with people. I see you, Don. I'm going to come to you first on this one because, you know, you were the black sheep last week where Doug, Pat and I were coming at you on the after show saying that you were the wrong one on this. And, you know, I don't want to be an asshole about it, but you were the wrong one on this in the sense that the three of us were saying, I don't think Health Canada is going out of their way to try to like make Drew Dilkins look like an asshole. I don't think Health Canada went out of their way to try to make Windsor look like it did something wrong. Again, this whole situation was a private conversation, and Pat disagreed with me on this, but I still stand by it. This was a private conversation where Health Canada said, don't stop making it, quite frankly, because we haven't been making it for months. They just simply said, destroy your inventory and stop distributing it. But the mayor decided to go on his offensive. He put out a press release and he got his very good media coverage, which again, quite frankly, kudos to him.
He didn't put out a press release, John.
Oh, excuse me, not a press release.
There was an anonymous leak from City Hall.
Thank you. It's more than likely the mayor's office did what the mayor's office is very good at doing in this community. Somehow our media had found out about this situation. But Don, I want to come to you. You were the one that tried to tell us that we were wrong. I'm not trying to say that you have to defend yourself by any means. This is not, you know.
Is this a dunk on Don segment? Is that what's happening?
It
here?
really sounds like it. He doesn't know how this is going to come back on him in about 13 seconds.
Oh, do it by all means. By all means. I'm not trying to come at you hard. You were just the only one on the panel at the time to say that this was not something that should be, you know, as concerned about, I guess, as the rest of your panelists were suggesting. So where are you standing now that the recall has been implemented, saying that it's unhealthy, a problem for your health if you used it, in the context that, again, this shouldn't have been a public story. We shouldn't have done our show about it. This shouldn't have been an after show.
Well, and no, I agree with you on that. This could have been handled very quietly.
Okay, mute Don. Doug, if you don't mind, we have a new segment to go to. I'm right, he's wrong.
That's right. Meanwhile, stealing from Stephen Colbert. So yeah, I still think the original complaint about labeling and things like that is BS during a pandemic, and I stand by that. and I would want them to do the same thing if this situation arises again.
Okay, interjecting hard again. I don't mean to be a dick. I've dealt with this Health Canada process of actual application and approvals in the cannabis industry and the sector. And so you're saying, like, the labeling thing, I disagree, and I agree with you on that. But like, if Health Canada is trying to tell you you screwed up,
yeah. Well, and you should listen to them, because at the end of the day, they have final say.
Should this have gotten to that point? I mean, they
course.
gave you the easy stick.
Of course not. Of course it shouldn't have got to that point. And I said that in the last week's show. But again, during a pandemic times when this was all going down, we weren't getting any support for things like that from the feds. So, I think the city did the right thing. There's a recall on this now. I don't know what the purpose of the recall is. They said it irritates your hands. I used it for a long time, didn't bother me. But again, we had Wolfhead doing it. We had BASF. So there's other companies. So I'm not sure if this is even applicable to what the city's got in storage right now. I don't know if it's BASF material, Wolfhead Brewery, or if it is the Hiram Walker stuff, or Wolfhead Distillery. Sorry. So yeah, I mean, if Health Canada says they got to stop selling it, they got to stop selling it. But given the time situation when this all happened, I still think the city did the right thing, and I'd want them to do the same thing again.
That's fair. I appreciate that. Again, I don't think that anyone did anything wrong with expediting approvals at the outset, but again, it's the months later response. Doug, your input on this? We got to move on.
Just quickly, I think this probably indicates, this new news about Hiram Walker probably indicates that there is Health Canada is taking a look at some of the things that they probably looked the other way on during the pandemic itself. I wouldn't be surprised if there isn't more material, things that have been produced by non-traditional suppliers that may end up having this type of thing happen. At the end of the day, I think everybody did what's right here. Everybody involved did the right thing. They were moving quickly in an emergency situation to try to get people the stuff that they needed. And, it's not surprising that a new producer might have some hiccups and bumps along the way. And, it is what it is.
It is what it is. We'll have to leave it there. We'll learn more about it probably next week, maybe the week after. Lord knows that in Windsor, we always find out the back side of the stories. Moving on, though, the plan to outsource caretakers at Windsor City Hall has been canceled. We briefly touched upon this before, but it's been firmly finalized now. The city of Windsor has reversed course on its plan to outsource custodial jobs. Council voted in a plan that would have seen GDI take over City Hall complex at a lower rate. As of last November, the city announced GDI could no longer guarantee that the tender was expected to save taxpayers more than the $300,000 that it was supposed to come in at. The union president of QP 543 said 7 full-time and 7 part-time positions, I guess, are now saved. And the city is going to be reestablishing 7 full-time caretaker positions that were set to be filled through attrition. I'm going to come to you on this one, Doug. You brought this story forward to us, so I want to come to you first on it. But I will say at the outset, to get my point across, what a wild situation to be in, where you have, and I get it, it's COVID, so we're in a weird situation. It's not, I guess, like what anyone would have expected. But what a wild time to be in, where the city outsourced jobs to a company that said they could do it at a lower rate, and then came back to the city and said, nah, actually, you guys are doing it cheaper than we can do, when they're union paid jobs. Now, I get, again, as I said, we're in a pandemic, but like, I've been following municipal news for, I guess I consider a while now. It's 13 years I'm still a youngling, I guess, if you were to look at the panel, but like, Lord, my May, I have never seen anything like this.
Yeah, we're not going to ask you your opinion on Mayor Kish Khan, John.
Thank you. I wish not.
I,
It's just through the old scribes that I've read my pieces of the history.
this story is I agree with you. Like, it's interesting and it's puzzling to me. I would love to know why uh, the GDI were not able to honor their bid. I'd love to know the reason why. And there's, we can speculate about that, and but we don't have any firm information. It is pretty unusual that a bid would be withdrawn, or that the bidder would say they were no longer able to fulfill the contract. And I'm not really sure. I would think that there would be penalties potentially involved with something like that, because you're going to impose costs on the city if you can't fulfill your bid. So it's really strange when you read the comments in the piece and you think about how mild they are and how much they seem to be dancing around the subject. I feel like there's something that we don't know here. Um, I'm also curious, and I don't have the details in front of me, but apparently there wasn't a second bidder, or the second bidder wasn't cheaper than insourcing the work, because you would think normal practice would be, if the first bidder for whatever reason can't fulfill the contract, that you would move on to the second bidder and give them an opportunity. At the end of the day, uh, I wasn't in favor of this outsourcing from the start. I don't think that it's the right thing for the city to be doing, to be, eliminating decent jobs in the city that they are in control of, and outsourcing to jobs that are significantly less decent. Just to put some context on that, the caretaker jobs pay between about $21 and $25 per hour at the city of Windsor and come with benefits. At the time that this was awarded to GDI, the speculation in the newspaper is that they would pay somewhere between minimum wage and $17 and have little or no benefits attached to it. So the quality of the job, and therefore probably the quality of the worker, and the incumbency that you're going to get from your workforce, is significantly different. So I'm not real unhappy about this. I guess the question is, what is it? What is the reason, and what's it going to do to the city's ability to outsource in the future? Is this a one-off, or is this some reason that it's going to keep cropping up?
Yeah, Don, that's my question to you. I think Doug just hit it on the head right there. We're going to be talking about an expropriation issue coming up in the next segment, or the second next segment, and how the repercussions of it could spill over. Do you think that there might be the possibility that this situation could spill over? How surprised are you to see that the city's actually able to provide in-house union paid jobs with benefits, all of those bonuses, at a cheaper rate than what a private sector endeavor can? And I guess, final question to you as well. I don't mean to do a three-parter, but I mean, does that really turn upside down this idea? And I'm coming at to you because, you're the right wing guy on the panel. Does this turn the idea of outsourcing upside down, or do you think it's just, contextualized here because it's COVID? Lots of
Well,
questions. I'm sorry.
yeah, that's a lot of questions there. Well, I would outsource the mayor's job if I could. So I'm a big fan of outsourcing any kind of government employees to the private sector.
I would
Uh,
too, if only it wasn't just a left wing plight as well.
yeah, well, it depends who's in power at the time. Yeah, I guess without the details, it's very interesting that this happened. Because if you look at the salaries, like Doug had mentioned, the hourly rates, and I think the benefits are the big thing, because we all know, government employees have benefits that most people in the private sector could never dream of having. So I think that's where the expense really is. Uh, One question I have, and I don't know if either of you guys know, when was the outsourcing agreement and put out there for tender? When was this, pre-COVID or during COVID?
Oh, it was definitely pre-COVID because it was agreed upon. Like the outsourcing was supposed to, I guess, go back to November of last year. So of course the negotiations would have been before that.
Okay,
Yeah.
so
So we have a piece here, November 18th, 2020, Brian Cross in the Windsor Star headline, move to outsource City Hall cleaning staff in midst of pandemic, a shocker, says union leader. So apparently it was a shocker, November of last year.
well, I
So
guess
we can all say that, of course, like administration was dealing with this for probably a month to 2 months.
yeah. So obviously they knew the situation. Well, the reason I asked that question, one thing that I was curious about, and we don't have the answer to this, but I'm just gonna put it out there. Did because of COVID and obviously cleaning protocols and the way cleaners are doing their jobs change dramatically, just from your standard pre-COVID days? Maybe it was just a situation where they may not have been able to get employees because the employees felt they would have to go into these high risk health situations, or maybe the work that was put in the tender for the contract, the duties expanded because now we had higher cleaning protocols and higher standards we had to go to. I'm just wondering if basically the job
Sure.
description changed.
I think I think that Don, again, I'm not trying to be an asshole towards you. I think that you just hit maybe the potential like nail on the head of it. Like, oh, did the job description change? Well, what actually changed about it potentially? Well, it had a lot more risk, I suppose,
Well, risk, and also the protocols for cleaning have changed. Like even at our office, I know our cleaners are doing twice the work they were doing before. So maybe when the tender went out and the company bid on it, after the fact, they said, well, this job has changed and we can't do it at that rate. Maybe they couldn't get employees. Maybe they just couldn't get employees to do it at that cheap.
I guess what I'm suggesting is, and Doug, I'll bring you in. I know that you've got something to say quickly here, or that you have something to say, excuse me. Or maybe we have just reached the point that the workers that we have for the rate that they were being paid might just not have been the level that was, equal to the private sector, but at the same time, was it applicable to what should be paid out generally? If people aren't willing to take the job that you have, I get it. It's in a pandemic, so you've got some added stuff on top of it. But at the same time, what does that say outside of pandemic, and what does it say about these types of jobs? This goes to the conversation of all of our most important workers, our essential workers, are being paid this rate that I think that you're sort of getting at, just the idea of it's a job, take the job, it's there for you if you want it, you don't have to take it, whatever. But I guess this hesitancy, how does that apply broader to that? So Doug, if you could just address, I guess, that topic, but get to what you want to say. I'm sorry.
Yeah. Yeah, that's okay. I kind of doubt that a shortage of workers is the reason. I think that would be something that would be stated. And I also don't think
That's a really good
um,
point. I do
I,
agree with you. I think that it would probably have been like addressed in the star piece, at least if it was provided to them. Like, oh, there were X amount of applications, but X amount didn't follow through.
if there was a reason that was if there was a reason that was palatable, I think we would have heard it in this, we would have read it in the piece. And I don't think that the job description changed significantly. And the reason I think that is that I believe that you would have to recall the contract if the parameters of it changed significantly. And I don't think we would be getting the same story if that's what happened, because it would be entering a renegotiation with the vendor. So I think straight up what happened here is that for some reason, the vendor is not able to fulfill the commitment that they made in the tender. One thing that's really missing from this story is a comment from the vendor, which, lots of times private sector companies don't feel the need to comment on stuff like this, and fair enough. But there is a reason. We don't know it. I hate to throw cold water on your speculations, but none of them strike me as particularly plausible.
Yeah, I mean, again, we just don't know. So I mean, and you'd brought up, where was the second bidder on this, or was there a second bidder on this? Yeah, it's an interesting. It's odd. I've never seen something like this happen. So yeah, it'd be interesting to know actually why, the details of why they're not doing it. Whether it's whether it's something that the supplier just underestimated cost or something like that, or if there's pandemic specific reasons that he can't get people right now, or yeah, it's just without knowing, you're just throwing speculation around. So it's weird to see this happen. It'll be interesting to see if going forward they try this again, maybe in a couple of years once the world is back to quote unquote normal.
Yeah, I'm really interested in that too. I'm really, like I said at the start of this segment, I'm really interested to see whether whether and how outsourcing as a broad sort of policy initiative is something that Mayor Dilkins has been in favor of and pushing for his entire term. So it'll be interesting to see whether that continues or if it starts to peter out now.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it's one of those crazy stories that I don't think any of us expected to see happen. I mean, especially in Windsor and outsourcing, to be told that it has to be insourced by the private company that it was outsourced to. I am very interested to see how this story evolves, and Lord knows we'll continue to follow it. Moving right along, though, this story hits close to home for me, at least, quite frankly. Swastika sign found on hospital property. CTV's Chris Campbell put this one out. The CEO of Hotel du Grace Healthcare has spoken out after a swastika flag was found near in the hospital property at the entrance. The painted sign was found yesterday. It resembled an altered Canadian flag with the maple leaf replaced by a swastika. Of course, Windsor police are on this, and apparently it's the second occurrence of a hate motivated crime that officers have been investigating in the past couple of days. Uh, these are tough stories. Like, these are really tough stories. They happen every couple of years in the Jewish community. For those of you listening who don't know, I'm Jewish. That's my background. I grew up in it, and Windsor's been a great community. And we have these things, and they pop up every couple of years, and they're meaningless in the sense that there's no one in these faith communities, whether it be the Jewish community or whether, a couple of years ago, I brought some attention to some Muslim graffiti that was happening. Like, it's not new. People in these communities are used to it, but Lord, if it doesn't feel different during like the pandemic, I guess, right?
Yeah.
You know,
Do you think it is opportunistic? Do you think it's just, the anti-mask, the whole COVID crowd is just going to extremes that are just, utterly fucking
yeah,
ridiculous? Or do you think this is, these white supremacy organizations are using this as an opportunity to get out there and start spreading their message and kind of hiding behind these anti-COVID people?
I like that's it, right? When this happened a couple years ago and I first spoke out about the graffiti going on at bus shelters and stuff, and it was saying like Islam is the root of all evil, or like there was some shit like that. And it was clear like this isn't a guy who actually like believes, like this is just an easy outlet to like say some shit and get it out there. And I really feel like it's obvious that with this one here at the hospital, like it's obviously not it's not a Windsor Nazi. I hate Windsor Nazis. If I were to appropriate the Blues Brothers quote, it's not like someone espousing Nazi views here. They're trying to suggest that the Canadian government is the Nazi government because of, I guess, the restrictions or whatever that these idiots decide to attach to these days. But the problem is that there are so many people that don't host a podcast like we do and read all of the news stories that exist like we do and understand the nuances of these inside politics things. And if someone sees that Nazi on the Canadian flag, they might not think that it's attacking the Canadian government. They might think that it is respecting the Nazi symbol in some way, shape, or form. And it's just an idiocy. It's ridiculous. And it's a conversation that, quite frankly, the CEO of Hotel du Grace Healthcare does not need to be engaging in whatsoever. Lord knows our healthcare workers are working so hard, just
Yeah.
trying to do their best.
So I tend to I tend to see things your way on this, John. I think that that's probably how I interpret that symbol as well. That it's it's meant as a very clumsy commentary on mask mandates and other public health measures. That's probably what's happening. Um, I'll say this though, I think that when you're comfortable reaching for that type of symbol and deploying that type of symbol in your rhetoric, whatever your message, you're in a dangerous and bad territory, and it's unacceptable. Like it's trivializing something that matters a lot. Um, but I think you're probably right that it is meant as a anti-authoritarian, anti-mask, anti-public health type of message, and it's just very, very clumsy. So if you guys are okay with it, I'd like to bring something in here just to add maybe another layer to this discussion. Yesterday
Please.
on Twitter, last night late on Twitter, actually, Frank Graves, who is a acquaintance of the show, we like Frank. We read Frank's stuff. We've talked about his stuff on the show before. Last night, his Twitter handle is @voiceoffrankie. That is a boomer Twitter handle, Frank. Um, he tweeted a series of slides about vaccine acceptance and the perspective of people in Canada on different issues. And his conclusion, I just want to read a couple things from his concluding slide. And I do encourage everyone to go and check out his Twitter account because it is interesting. His conclusion to all of this research, and we'll dig into some of the other numbers, is that the public may well be interested in a rebalancing of the economy and the society, that there is potentially more appetite among Canadians generally for more government intervention, a stronger social safety net, and so forth. But pulling in the opposite direction, we have expressions of authoritarian populism. And this, I think, really relates to that. One of his other slides, he breaks out attitudes on issues, and this is fascinating. And that instead of breaking it down by political party or age demographic, or one of the things that you typically would break down those type of attitudes on, he breaks it down on the axis of whether the respondent is well informed or very disinformed. So they determined who was informed and disinformed by asking a battery of questions, of factual questions about the COVID pandemic, basically to find out if this is a person who reads the news and understands what's going on around them. For example, 81% of well-informed Canadians think that climate change should be a high priority. 11% of very disinformed Canadians think that climate change should be a high priority. And it goes on from there. But I think it's really interesting because if you connect this to the previous conversation we've had about Frank Graves' research, in which he identified Windsor as one of the Canadian hotspots for this authoritarian populism, which he also characterizes as open versus ordered. It's really interesting to think about that. And we certainly in this region have seen a pretty strong anti-mask perspective, anti-vaccination. I'm starting to hear a lot of that.
Yeah.
And, I think we're susceptible to that. And I think this is really important stuff to think about because it has the potential to strongly impact on our politics and policy. And I just wanted to bring that into the conversation. Sorry
I,
for monopolizing for a couple minutes, guys.
No, I think it's really good. And Don, just let me jump in here quickly before you come in. I don't mean to also further monopolize, but I've got the race car, which means I'm in control of the board right now. Doug, I'm always surprised, Don as well, you guys, that you hear people outside of Windsor, Essex. You hear people outside of, I guess I would suggest Hamilton and more of those Rust Belt type Ontario Canadian cities, right? That have dealt with those typical type things. And people don't understand how easy it is for someone who is NDP to potentially just, sidestep over to conservative. and it's the populism, it's the economic fighting for the job perspective, I guess. And I really think that that comes to what you're talking about there, Doug, and that, it we've seen a lot of what you just described down here in Windsor. And while it might seem like to a lot of people outside of our region as an anti NDP sentiment, and you look at our politics and you look at our elected representatives and you go, wow, they're pretty well plurality orange, except for a couple here or there. Uh, how does that happen? And I don't think a lot of people recognize how actually close conservative to NDP is, um, when it comes to those economic populism issues. So I guess, Don, I just said you were going to talk, but I guess screw you. Doug, can you respond to that quickly and then give it back to Don, or give it to Don?
Sure. I think it's probably true that there is significant crossover potential there between NDP and Tories, the way that the parties are currently set up. Certainly, I think both the
Well, Lord knows they're both fighting for it too, right?
yeah, well, I think that it's certainly true that both the Conservatives, federally and provincially, particularly provincially, and the NDP are both trying to appeal with a populist message and bring a populist message to politics. And that's not something necessarily that liberals have done in recent years, although liberals certainly have partaken in populism in the past, definitely within our lifetimes. I think that I think people tend to underestimate how non-ideological even committed voters are. You might well be a committed NDP voter, but that does not mean that that you have socialist leanings or that you have some kind of coherent ideology. Their message may have appealed to you over the course of a number of elections, and same with the Conservatives. I just don't think that normal people, non-political weirdos, I don't think that normal people tend to align themselves so tightly with a political ideology and think through it like that. I just don't think so.
I
So it makes
so
perfect sense to me.
I hear you on that, but I also I hear the opposite of it a lot when I speak with like my friends that have introduced friends of theirs who work like in the plants and stuff. And the connection between, they tell you that you should vote NDP, the union takes your money, what's the outcome that you get from that? And that through line is a very clear one to, well, the government shouldn't be taking as much money as they do out of your pocket, i.e. taxation, which then leads directly to that conservative conversation of, lower taxes. That's what we believe in. I've spoken to so many people that have expressed that exact through line. And of course, we are so off of what we started talking about right now, but
That's okay.
I
This is
find it
good
to be
stuff.
so interesting. Like,
Well,
do you understand like what I'm
yeah.
suggesting at all?
And I mean, think back to 2016 in the States, right? One of the reasons that Donald Trump was successful in that election was that he found a way to narrowly win formerly Democratic states. He found a way to appeal at least the narrative after the election. I don't have data in front of me, and nor have I recently looked at it, but at least the media narrative after the election was that appealing to blue collar voters was one of the ways that he was able to kind of get over the hump and narrowly win the presidency in 2016. So there is a path for moving people from what would look like a more left political perspective to a more right political perspective. And Don, I see that you're ready to speak to this from a very, very personal perspective.
Yeah, well, given this topic, I figured I'd go get my NDP shirt on that Councillor McKenzie gave me for killing the Windsor West back a few elections ago. Yeah, I think what bringing up the United States, I think is important. And if you said this while I ran out of the room for 5 seconds, I think down here we are inundated with American media, and we're almost. I mean, there's been many a topic that's come up that says Windsor's kind of its own little world, because we're Americanized on some level. I think there's a lot of people down here who follow American politics a lot closer than they follow Canadian politics. And if we look over the last 4 years, given the broad topic, misinformation, uh, convincing people to distrust, trustful media sources, not to believe anything that anybody else says unless it comes from my mouth. And I think there's a bunch of people who, locked onto that because that was kind of their preconceived notions about government anyway. All politicians lie, and the media is just there to help them lie and get power. And, when you bring it back around to a topic like COVID, I mean, I think that's why in this area you see that more, because that was, propaganda works. Governments have used it for centuries, and it's not because it doesn't work. Marketing works. I'm in the real estate business. I know marketing works. I see some really bad real estate agents who are great marketers who I would never let sell a fridge to me, let alone a house, but they make a lot of money because they're great marketers. I think we run into that problem here. Like I said, a lot of it has to do with geography. We're very associated with America down here, where I think, when I lived in Toronto, it was like I was living in a different world. There are actual real Canadians up there. It's Canadian news, it's Canadian music, it's Canadian everything. And you didn't have access to American news channels like you do down in this location. I mean, it's a little different now because of cable and satellite and all that, but back in the day, that wasn't the case. And to go kind of to the, I put on my NDP shirt just to kind of make John's point. I think there is flu. I think people at the end of the day, most normal people, not us who pay attention to politics way too much, I think they vote self-interest. And I think that's how in the States Donald Trump got elected and took over your traditional Democratic voters, because he spoke to them, said government's screwing you, Democrats don't care about you, I'm going to fight for you. I mean, it all turned out to be bullshit, but that's the way you win elections, right? He went out there and said all politicians lie, and then went out there and lied his ass off and got elected. So, but he convinced everybody else that it's them, it's not me. It's, and that's how you get people. That's how you manipulate people. You convince them that everybody else is wrong, you're right, and they're just lying to you. And anytime they disagree with you, it's because they're part of the grand conspiracy. So, bringing it again back to COVID, I think that's been a big problem down here. You're seeing it also in other areas, but I think in this, geographic location, it's probably a little more focused, just because, like I say, the access we have to the American media and how closely we seem to follow American politics, which I don't really believe is, take out the Trump years, that's a whole different world. But, traditionally, I don't think people, in Montreal or, Winnipeg really pay attention to American politics as much as we do down here.
Well, I mean, we can't. We are the epitome of the embodiment of Trudeau Senior's line: sleep in a bed with an elephant, and no matter what the the rollover is, you're gonna feel the effects of it. So I mean,
Well,
yeah,
well, not only that, but our economy is so intertwined locally with
100%.
the
Well,
American economy that
well, yeah, that's
it's
my point.
important. It's
That,
important, right?
yeah, that's exactly my point. Like we are so directly linked in to it. That's why we have, our antennas up in the way that we do, especially relating back to the subject that we're talking about here, which I guess, to tie it all together, while we're talking about the isolated incidents here of, a swastika appearing at the hospital, it's about the extremism, I guess, slipping across the border, and how easy and how susceptible our region may be towards it. And maybe it's related to how hyper tuned our media is to it. Should they be covering these stories? I don't want to suggest the media shouldn't cover these stories, but if it was in Toronto, if it was in a bigger city, would it receive the attention that it did? Would Hotel du Grace Healthcare be able to garner the attention through their media release condemning it as it does? I'm not there. There's no condemnation by any means, but I guess the question is how do we act? How should we act on this, you guys? Like, how should our politicos like us? Lord knows there's other radio panels that exist in this area. There's hosts that do these conversations. How should they be reacting? How should we be reacting? How should our elected leadership be acting? How should
Yeah,
they react to this?
yeah, it's a tough call because I mean, my first reaction to that question is just ignore the morons and don't give them more press than they want to get.
It's such a good point, because quite frankly, like if it's something that was only seen by 3, 4 people, what's there to gain, right?
Yeah.
And that's, I mean, this goes back to our thing that we always talk about at Windsor Media. It's so easy to get media coverage down here. Is that a problem when it comes down to these like societal issues?
Yeah, I mean, we've had the anti-mask rallies where, 20 people show up and you think half the city was there. I mean, I think that's, you know, I think just the reality is, the crazy stuff's going to get media coverage. That's just the way it is. In this specific situation, if you're going to do something like that, there's many different things you can say. One, you are completely oblivious to how fortunate you are to live in Canada relative to what the Nazi regime was and what the Jewish people had to go through during that time. And if you think you're even remotely close to being in the same situation, you're probably the dumbest fucking moron I've ever met in my entire life and probably shouldn't be allowed to vote or have children.
I knew I liked you, Don.
Yeah,
Just always looking for, the reason why. Thank you
there's
for
a soft
proving.
side to me. It's just the way it is. And it actually, if you look at it in a bigger spectrum, it's, look, if you look at my generation, I'm 53 years old. I was born in the 60s. You know what? I have understood
Eligible for COVID vaccine now.
100%. I'm getting in there as soon as I can. My dad was born during World War I, but if you're under 45 years old, you're almost getting disassociated. World War II is now just something you see on TV all the time. And you really have no firm grasp as to what really happened to Jewish people during that whole situation, and what happened during World War II with Russians and Ukrainians. My family's Ukraine. I can give you that whole story even pre World War II. So we're almost in a situation where we're just so oblivious to the reality of how horrible it was, and how fortunate we are that we never ever have to deal with this, that morons think it's just funny to have a Jewish star painted on with an anti-mask thing like they did on Calgary, or this moron whoever did this. They're just ignorant, stupid people, and unfortunately they're out there. And I think you really, either you have to hit them with a stick or ignore them. That's my opinion.
You hit a really good point right there. You think of anyone's like grandpa in North America, and it's like, what do they want to do? Well, I'd love to sit down and just watch any World War II flick for like 6 to 12 hours, because that's what I do and I love it. And like, we stopped teaching like the importance, I guess, of why all of that was so important. So I guess it's not surprising to see, I guess the backlash against what would be perceived common sense decency, without that knowledge there. Doug, I'll leave you with the final thought on this one before we go on to our last topic here of the night. Do you think that, I guess, Don's sentiment there is on the right track, that it's just a lack of understanding of how horrific these comparisons are? Or do you think it's something more malicious? I'm inclined to think it's not malicious, even as horrific as it is.
Well, I think there's a few different things happening here. I do think there's an aspect of, collective memory. The reality is that we are not, as a society in North America, we are not a historically minded people, and we don't hold on to a solid picture of the past for very long.
Such a good perspective.
When's the last time that somebody, that the Haymarket massacre came up in conversation, just as an example? How often do we talk about World War One with any kind of like meaningful knowledge?
Well, I guess I think to like, Howard Zinn's History of America, just in terms of like how much of our history wasn't actually taught to us because it didn't fit in the orthodoxy that had been created for us.
Sure, I think that's part of it, and I think every country probably participates to an extent in myth making about itself in terms of telling its own history. But I think part of it is just that people also don't retain the things that they learned in 11th grade history for their entire lives. And if that's the connection that you have to the past, that you're probably not going to retain it. And we're getting to a point now where the Second World War ended over 70 years ago. You know, it's going on 80 years, and so it's passing out of living memory. And I do think that that's a significant part of why these symbols become more trivialized as things go forward. That's part of it. But to get to your question about how it should be handled, uh, look, the media is always going to show up for a freak show. And you know, you compare the amount of coverage and attention that anti-mask protesters have gotten, compare that to the level of coverage that the Windsor Peace Coalition gets. You know, bless those folks. They have their perspective. They're out there demonstrating very frequently. They have done for years. And it has to be a pretty darn slow news day before there's, you know, a few column inches devoted to the work of the Windsor Peace Coalition, because it's not a freak show.
So let me
And it,
jump in right. Let me jump in right there, Doug. Only because I remember you bringing this up literally a year ago, probably within a week on either side of where today is. Because the first coverage, I remember that was the first protest that the anti-maskers did at Ottawa and Walker Road. And you specifically said, both publicly and in our private chat, you know, imagine how much coverage any of the hardworking activists would do to never get the coverage that these people are getting, simply because, you know, I guess quite frankly, they're the worst of the worst that are trying to go out there. I remember you saying this, and I guess I don't mean to stop you, but like, it's been a year, and
yeah.
it only adds to exactly what you're saying.
So I
Like,
guess
where have
A,
these people been over the past year trying to get the coverage? They haven't gotten
it's nice that I'm consistent, apparently, and
it.
B, Margaret and Enver, if you're listening, you got to crank up the freak factor if you
This
want to get if you want to get the coverage.
And
But
it was Margaret and Enver exactly that you had mentioned in the private chat a year ago. 100%. They do such a good job at getting their word out, but gosh darn, they don't get any coverage for it.
If they
so
would walk around with like an M16 strapped to their back at their peace coalition rallies and say, you know, peace or we're going to kill you all, maybe that'll get some media coverage. That'll work.
yeah,
We're
but in
here
terms of
to impose democratic communism through our assault rifles. That is a really good way to get media coverage. I agree.
Communism is the last thing that's peaceful, but go on.
okay, so putting all that stuff aside, because that could derail the show. Um, in terms of how the media and leaders in the community and politicians should respond, I think that what Janice Caffer did and what Hotel Do did was correct. If something like this happens on your property, you certainly want to make sure that it's clear in no uncertain terms that you don't approve, that you disagree. I think that's right. Um, I think the biggest thing, though, that leaders can do is, if to the extent that you're worried about populism, and to the extent that you're worried about authoritarian populism, and you think it's dangerous, and you think it's potentially a problem, then what you need to do is resist the temptation to participate in it. And I think that our leaders in our community, and elected leaders, but not all elected leaders, have sometimes failed to resist that urge to appeal to populism and to play silly games and to make things a lot simpler than they really are, for the express purpose of whipping up public sentiment in one
Doug,
direction or another.
Doug,
Resist that.
would it be wrong if I were to, I don't know, I'm just gonna pull something out of my head, like, let's just say a minority group attacked a majority group in a situation that had nothing to do with, you know, racism as far as could be investigated. Would it be wrong to go out of your way to, I don't know, maybe set up a community parade that in a inadvertently sought to villainize a certain ethno religious group? Would that be the wrong thing to do in this situation, or the right thing to
Yeah.
Look, man, we are not bailing you out of jail, Lidkey.
So yeah. So I think you're referring to the Ganacho Trail incident and the response to it. And I think that's exactly what I'm talking about. This is so tough to talk about. Like, I try to assume good faith on the part of everybody involved.
It's easier just to be an asshole and try to make a joke about it.
Well, I know I should try to be more like you guys, but it's
It's not a
I
fun topic. There's nothing fun about it.
I
It's
try to
really hard.
assume I try to assume good faith, and uh, I don't want to pretend to be able to look into the minds of others and say what was going through their minds. But I think in talking about that particular incident, whether it was knowingly or not knowingly, whether it was purposeful or accidental, I do think that there was some dabbling happening with some unsavory messages and some really, really dark forces in our community. A little bit of dabbling with it, and the price that you pay when you do that is that you encourage the cockroaches to kind of come out into the light, and that is exactly what happened in that particular instance, whether it was intentional or not intentional. And that's exactly what I'm talking about. I think I don't know if people understand in this town the extent of the danger, but
Or how easy it is.
all you have to do is look south of the border to see what can happen when those kind of forces become unchecked in a political conversation. They've got a problem in the U.S. They've got a big problem with right wing populism that is totally detached from reality. And if we are not careful, we could land in a similar place. So I think that responsible leaders and responsible politicians need to think hard before they take the cheap shot or before they go for the easy win. Think hard about what you're encouraging. That's all.
I think that you're absolutely right. I mean, I have hosted, 10 to 20 events, public events, drawing, 200 to 400 people at any of them over the course of whatever my professional career is. I come from a family that has done this. My parents have been the organizers of Blues Fest International. Out of any of the events that like myself or my parents have done, there's never been, a political figure that's been photographed with a white supremacist leader. And I guess the point that I'm just simply trying to make is why is it at that event that we're discussing right now, did a white supremacist group feel comfortable coming out to it, feel comfortable getting a photograph with our elected officials, our appointed officials, the police chief in that case, and feel comfortable publicizing it? So it's a roundabout idea. And I guess just simply the point being is I agree with you, Doug. It's really easy here in our cross border community that is Windsor, Ontario, to whip up these sentiments, to jump onto these sentiments. And we might think that they're easy to gain political points, but Lord, there's some underlying issues that need to be considered because it's not going to be best for us here.
Give me 1 second. If I didn't, I don't know if you're
no, I was going to bring you in, Don. Absolutely.
Okay. And I think the people who are putting on these idiotic events and where these kind of things are happening, if you're not going to call, if the leaders who are putting these people, and it's the same, we know who the people are, like if you're not calling out these kind of tactics as unacceptable, outlandish, then you are a piece of trash just like they are. You've accepted them, you've brought them into your organization, and you're a piece of crap. And no matter how you like to disassociate yourself from these people, you are one of them.
And I don't think any of us are suggesting that anybody here, I'm going to do the liability thing. None of us here are suggesting that anyone that we've been discussing are, welcoming them in. But yeah, please continue.
Sorry. Yeah, but if you don't call them out and say, okay, look, we had our little event, but this was unacceptable, then you're accepting of that behavior and then you're part of the problem. And for anyone, whoever put that sign out there, if you're going to do something like that, at least don't be a punk ass coward and go running, scurrying back in the dark. Own it. Sit there with your sign. Let people know who's putting it out there and make your point. If you think Canada is even remotely like the situation was in Nazi Germany, get in the media, come on this show and explain your point to us. Don't put signs up and run away like a little rat coward bastard you probably are, and hide in the dark and think you're funny. And for the people putting these organizations on, if you're going to let people do that, then you are exactly like these people and you deserve everything that would happen to you associating with these people.
100%. You want to tell me to my face that it's exactly the same as my family being dragged into gas chambers and, killed. That's what it's like for you not to be able to go, I guess, get a haircut. Let me know that to my face. Otherwise, I guess, grow some balls.
Well, they won't because they're cowards, right?
Well, and that's the point. So we're gonna be hitting our lightning round. Lightning round. We don't have our soundboard hooked up, so I had to sub that in.
We did not steal this from Jim Cramer, by the way.
So we're just going to go through this very quickly. It's a new segment we're adding. You're just going to get a quick take from each of us. The city of Windsor has lost their appeal. They're on the hook now for $6.2 million for the Spring Garden expropriation. It's a 24-year battle between the city and the family. The Ontario Superior Court dismissed the appeal. They awarded the Paciorca family roughly $3 million plus interest on some portions of land dating back to 1997. Mayor Dilkin says that the ripple effect, though, could end up costing upwards of $20 million because if this standard was applied to how other families were dealt with at the same time, oh boy, those costs could be adding up. Spring Garden is now regarded though as the environmental jewel that is part of the Ojibwe complex. There's so many endangered species in there, as we all know. A century ago, it was part of a large swath of rural land on the west side, and it was laid out for subdivisions, but it never quite materialized. And we're in this situation today. It's a tough one. I don't want to go any further into it. The government ruled, we're on the hook for it. The outlying and the ramifications are strong. I guess my perspective, I'll give it to you really quickly. This is why you don't want to screw up as a city. Dot your I's and cross your T's, and don't try to go out of your way to get a short-term gain, because the long-term is always going to hurt you. It's always going to happen. Doug, am I wrong on that assessment?
No, obviously nobody wants the city to be suddenly out $20 million because that's going to cost everybody. And in my view, expropriation power should be used very sparingly for matters of vital public interest, and the property owners should be fairly compensated for their land. And fair compensation, to me, means paying people what the property is worth at the time that it's expropriated. Clearly the LPAT tribunal didn't agree with the city's position, felt that the city did not do that thing, and therefore they have to pay. The city subsequently lost on appeal. So I think it'll be interesting to see where the city goes from here. Sounds like the stakes are pretty high, and you can understand why the city is continuing to fight in its own best interests and in some ways in the financial interest of taxpayers. But this is why you don't. This is why you do this stuff right, and you don't screw it up.
So where could they go before we bring Don in here? Or Don, if you want to answer, by all means. I mean, so it's at the Ontario Superior Court, right, of Appeal. We know that, I guess, the LPAT, of course, had been dismissed. So is the next step, I guess, to just continue this up the chain to eventually hit the Supreme Court and challenge it, hoping that they would even hear it? Like, am I like pulling it out of my ass here, or am I correct?
I am not the person to ask about legal matters, but according to the media article, there is still further appeals are possible. So, and according to statements from City Hall, they're considering their legal options. So they have remaining legal options. That's up to them what they do. But I don't, more than that, I can't say.
What's our budget on an annual basis?
City budget, something like $800 million.
So 20 million is a huge chunk by a lot of means. So I mean, it's definitely not.
Every
It's
every 4 million is a 1% tax increase. So because of that budget, only so much of it is funded by taxes. Of course, some of it is funded by senior levels of government. So in terms of the property tax bite, every $4 million is roughly a 1% tax increase. So if we were to pay this all in 1 year, and we did
it's
have to pay,
5%.
exactly, it's a 5% tax hike.
So it's definitely in the in our elected officials' interests to fight it. But at what point does it become not a break even perspective, and does it start costing you to try to get a win that has I guess a depreciation on it? Don, let's bring you in. It was supposed to be a lightning round, but Lord knows I'm saying way too much.
Yeah, I mean, this is a perfect example of why expropriating people's private property should be the last thing you do if it's not necessary. You know, I guess my opinion is really, look, in real estate, there is a theory that a property is worth its highest and best use. In this situation specifically, if I understand it correctly, is at the time the city expropriated this property, it had been set up and planned as a plan of subdivision with building lots. And you
Mhm.
can't go in and say, okay, we're going to give you the value on it based off of a piece of dirt. You have to now base it off of what its highest and best uses. And that was as residential building lots. So they were completely entitled to be compensated for the value at that time of whatever building lots were set up. We have this exact same situation with the County Road 42 property. The big outcry from the camp crowd was that, why did we pay half of, or however much they paid $100,000 an acre for this property that they referred to as a bean field? Well, you know what? They're right. If it was a bean field, farmer's land, it's probably worth $10,000 an acre. But its highest and best use, and the use that's going to be used for, is a commercial property. So you have to pay them based off of commercial property rates. So you can't have it one way when you're the one taking people's land, and have it the other way when you're trying to justify spending a lot of money on someone else's land. You know, we went through the same situation downtown with the where the aquatic center is now, that all that property they had expropriated originally, I believe, for the arena downtown. It's never a good idea. It always ends bad. Somebody ends up suing somebody. So if you're not going to offer people, you know, the theory is in the real estate world, especially when the road was being built for the new bridge, is you get the appraised value of the property plus 10% or 15%. That's what the government should pay you. Obviously, back in the day, they tried to shortchange these people because they thought they could get away with it. And now we're all paying for it. Cut your losses, pay them. You screwed up. You can't keep digging this hole deeper because you're never going to get out of it. Now they're just throwing crap at the wall and hoping something sticks and they don't have to pay this money. You screwed up. You got to pay it. Pay them the money. They deserve it. They should have got it back then. They never should have had to wait this long to get this much money. So everything that they get is well deserved because they should have got X number of millions of dollars back then, as opposed to the paltry sum that they did get.
No doubt. We're lucky that they didn't decide to build like 18 different condominium complexes going up 20 stories.
Well, and the
We'd be on
theory
the hook
is,
for so much more.
I mean, if you look at a piece of land like that, if you just look at the land, fine. What if there's an oil well in it? What if there's a gold mine underneath? You have to
Yeah.
pay them for the value, the highest and best use of that property. And if you know there's something there of value, which in this case was a residential plan of subdivision building house, you have to pay them based off of that. There's no fight in this. I don't even know why this is the first I heard of this, to be honest. I didn't know about the story. What's going on for 2 decades plus. Like, it's stupid the city's still fighting this. Like, why would you fight this? Just pay them. You're gonna lose. And you
I
deserve to lose.
Don, I love the idea of the city of Windsor building a park on top of a gold mine. That just tickles me.
Well, think of the fun for the kids. You got the old timey miner hats and the little things. You could put a pond going through, a stream going through there. Mine your gold. I go down south. Everywhere you go, there's like, come mine gemstones on the corner of off the highway. So it'd be a great attraction for the children.
Gosh, we still have to do our conversation on how Windsor Salt wants to just start moving into downtown Windsor and
That's a whole other conversation.
collapse our downtown core. Anyways, that's a conversation for another time. We are going to leave it all here, though. It's expropriation. It's one of those really tough ones. I'm 100% on Don's side on it. Like, if you're gonna do it, make it the last thing. I'm not suggesting, Doug, that you're on the opposite side of this by any means.
Well, okay,
but-
okay. Before you finish, let me ask you this question though.
Oh
So
God.
we had this conversation in, I forget what it's called, but over South Windsor way, where that little green patch, the province decided to deem it economically sensitive, where people had already paid for building lots in there. They had roads basically put in, services were put in, and then the province came in and shut that down. Now there's been a turnover on that. Given this situation, those people deserve to be paid if their lot plans were thwarted by the province because they changed their mind after the fact. Those people deserve $100,000 for those lots too. Call me, Don's Loyal Legal Services.
If
Don't
any of
call
them
Don's
were
legal services,
yeah,
folks.
don't do that. If any of them were opening up an ice cream parlor, I think they should be entitled to all of the potential sales of ice cream that they may or may not have had
100%.
during that period.
Yeah.
Hey, we've made it to the end, folks. We did it again. We always question whether or not we can do it. Can we pull off a full hour? Lord knows we can. We can go further than that. Doug, I think we did a good job. What do you think?
Good show.
I thought it was a good show too. Don, you think it's a good show or was this crap?
I got to call Nazis a bunch of punks, so I'm just waiting for my car to catch on fire.
Yeah. If any Nazis want to come after Rose City politics.
That's right. Doug lives on Roseland Drive.
Whoa. Whoa.
Now Doug has to go do a bit of editing.
We're just kidding. He doesn't live down there.
We'll hold
Okay.
it break. We'll hold a 5 second.
I've changed my review of the show has changed, John.
Well, anyways, it's been a fun show. If you're a listener and you enjoyed it, great. If you're a co-host and you enjoyed it like me, Lord knows, I'm just sitting back, sitting pretty. It's great. Having a great time. So, folks, from us to you, it's been a lot of fun. Go check out bizxmagazine.com, though. We've got a whole new column there. It was a good one. I think it was a pretty good one. We're talking about, post-COVID recovery, what Windsor should do, can do, opportunities that are available for us. You should check it out. You should also check us out on any of your social media networks, MySpace, Twitter, YouTube, Facebook, all of them. We're there. We're on your podcasting apps as well. And Lord knows, we could not be doing this show. It's been a full year. We've been doing it on Zoom. And LiUNA 625, not only do they build better communities, they build a better Rose City politics show. They make it possible for us to do it. And to us, that's the most important thing. And so for you, I hope you consider that as well. So check them out, LiUNA 625, building better communities. We will see you all next week. We might also be coming out with a Patreon. We put out a Patreon just a couple days ago. I think you want to check that one out. It was about the hand sanitizer issue. We gave a lot of the backstory to it. We gave some input here as well. And I don't know, something tells me our next Patreon might talk about it as well a little bit, but we're going to talk some behind the scenes stuff that you want to hear as well. So all that to say, head over to patreon.com/Rose City Politics. And we'll see you next week. It's going to be a great show because Windsor always has great issues to talk about. All the best.